morning. So good morning, everybody. My name is Katie Weldon, and I'm the Programming Director for the Mississippi Gulf Coast Chamber of Commerce. And I want to welcome you for attending our first Ask the Expert event for 2021. And I also want to welcome Mr. Moore Hallmark, of course, from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And if this is your first event with us, I want you to consider joining us as a member. There's great benefits, and upcoming in March, we actually have great opportunities opening. But if you're interested in those benefits and those resources, please go to our website, mscoastchamber.com. And right now, I'd like to thank our sponsors, Hancock Whitney and Memorial. Without them, we wouldn't be able to host these events for free. So thank you so much for your support. And on that note, we will play their sponsor videos.
To the people stepping up in the face of an unprecedented challenge, thank you for everything you're doing to serve our communities and keep us safe. To the people of Hancock Whitney, thanks for being the ones our clients can count on. Because even though it feels like everything has changed right now, it's reassuring to see that some things haven't. We'll get through this the same way we always do, together.
So once again, thank you so much to Hancock Whitney and Memorial Hospital of Gulfport. So before we get started, I'm just going to give you a brief overview, go over a little bit of ground rules before we turn it over and get all your questions answered from Moore. So the mission of the Mississippi Gulf Coast Chamber of Commerce is to connect, inform, advocate, and we develop. And we do that through programs such as these. So once again, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to join us. The question and answer box can be found at the bottom of your screen. Once again, if you have any questions for Moore, please put them in that Q&A box. There's also a chat box, but please be aware that the chat box is public information. And we ask, in this event, we actually can't answer any personal or any identifying questions. So please don't put any personal information out in the chat box, such as your banking numbers or anything like that. We just really don't want to compromise any information. And to make sure you get the full experience from today, if you do send a chat box, please make sure it says to all panelists and attendees, so that way everybody can see us. I'd also like for you to join us at our next Ask the Expert event with the SBA Office of Disaster Assistance happening January 21st. All of those links are going to be put in the chat box on your side. And that is also a free event. And this is about Hurricane Zeta loans. And this is a great opportunity if you had damage or if you just want to learn more about, God forbid, another disaster that comes our way. You just need to stay informed. So we ask that you join us at those events we have coming up, and those will be posted in the chat box. Right now, I would like to welcome and thank our CEO, Ms. Adele Lyons, for joining us this morning. Good morning, Adele.
Hey, good morning, Katie. How are you this morning? Moore, how are you doing?
I'm good, Adele. How are you doing?
Good. Thanks for being with us again. As you mentioned, this is your third presentation you've done for the Mississippi Gulf Coast Chamber of Commerce. And, we truly appreciate and have really found so much value in our membership with the U.S. Chamber and the information that it gives us. Straight from Washington, D.C., straight from leadership in the business community in our nation that we're able to bring back and share locally with our businesses and our members here. This one today is so important. As soon as the legislation was passed, I told Katie, get on the phone and call Moore. Let's get him scheduled because we found so much benefit in the first events that he presented for us and really getting down to the nitty gritty so folks can understand why they need to take advantage of these resources, what's in it for them, how to do it, where to go. It just really is so helpful. And I'd also like to thank Hancock Whitney Bank and Memorial, two really great institutions in our community that continue to give and are helping make things happen. So look forward to hearing what you have to say today. I know there's a lot of pieces and parts to it. And so I know you'll help us wade through all that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Adele, again for joining us this morning. So As the Expert is a program designed for professionals to gain insight from top leaders in the industry, such as Moore, on hot topic issues and best business practices. So on that note, I want to thank everybody for joining us this morning, but of course, a special thanks to Moore Hallmark for always being open to speak with us and to our community. Moore oversees the congressional and public affairs for 8 southeastern states. And the mission of the Southeastern Regional Office is to develop and maintain the region's legislative, political, and grassroots resources to achieve the U.S. Chamber's public policy goals. Moore has a political science degree from the University of Mississippi and a public relations degree from the University of North Alabama. And enough from me. Moore, take it away.
Great. Thank you, Katie. And Adele, thank you as well for the invitation and opportunity to join this morning. And let me just say Happy New Year. I hope everyone had an enjoyable holiday season this year. And we're certainly off to a very busy, chaotic, and challenging year in the first few weeks of 2021. But I'm confident in the business community, and we will maintain our focus as Tom Donahue laid out in his annual State of the American Business address yesterday, and we'll move forward. But anyway, today I just kind of want to talk a little bit about and mostly about the $900 billion end of the year pandemic relief package Congress passed and signed into law back at the end of January. It made several changes to the Paycheck Protection Program. It created a second draw PPP loan for those businesses who received a loan, an initial loan, and have exhausted those monies. Some other changes included eligibility for initial PPP loans now, loan forgiveness, the loan forgiveness process, and the tax treatment of PPP loans. Congress also made changes to other programs, the SBA's EIDL loan program, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, the Employee Retention Tax Credit, and a new venue grant program. And it's these programs that I'll focus my attention on this morning, as they are the most beneficial to small businesses as we continue to go through this challenging time with the pandemic and keeping our economy moving. First, let me begin with the Employee Retention Tax Credit. This was part of the original CARES Act, as you may recall, but didn't get as much attention last year, mostly because it wasn't as accessible as the PPP loan. But you're going to want to pay attention to this now. So what does it do and who qualifies? Well, beginning on January the 1st of this year, it's a refundable and an advanceable tax credit for up to $14,000 per employee. In general, if you have fewer than 500 employees and you've experienced more than a 20% decline in gross receipts in a quarter compared to the same quarter in 2019, meaning pre-pandemic, then you can qualify for this tax credit. Specifically, it's a $7,000 per employee per quarter for the first 2 quarters of 2021. So combined and collectively, it's a $14,000 per employee for both credits added together. Previously, it was a smaller tax credit of $5,000 per employee, and small businesses had to choose between taking it or getting a PPP loan. So a lot of people gravitated towards the PPP loan instead, frankly, because it was a better deal. But now Congress has removed that prohibition. So if you got a PPP loan in 2020, you can now take advantage of the Employee Retention Tax Credit in 2021. You may even be able to apply part of that looking backwards as part of your expenses in 2019. Now, this is a brand new opportunity for small businesses, and those in particular with fewer than 500 employees. And frankly, it's more generous than the original proposal as part of the CARES Act. So if you think this is you, or if this is you, this is a great time to start talking to your accountant, your bookkeeper, your payroll company, whoever it is that helps you with your payroll expenses, and how the employee retention tax credit can offset some of your wage expenses for the first 6 months of 2021. Plus, in addition to the 2021 credit, ask whoever prepares your taxes to look back at your 2020 expenses and see if you're able to claim the tax credit for some of your wages that you paid your employees last year. And keep in mind, again, in 2020, it was only a $5,000 tax credit, but still $5,000 per employee is worth talking to your tax preparer to find out if you can take advantage of that as well. This is one of the biggest changes in this new bill, and not having to pick between the tax credit and the PPP loan. And that's why it's so attractive to so many businesses now. Now, next up is the second draw of a PPP loan, which is a forgivable loan up to $2 million. It has all the same features of the original PPP loan program, but it's a bit more targeted to small businesses who were hit the hardest and who've exhausted their first run of PPP loan. The exceptions for the second draw are that you must have 300 or fewer employees. That's down from the original language of 500 employees. And you must meet a revenue reduction test. So under the original PPP loan program, it was simply you had to confirm that your business was being harmed economically by the pandemic. Now you have to demonstrate that you've had a reduction in gross receipts in a quarter in 2020 of 25% or greater relative to that same quarter in 2019. So for example, though, if your business only is off about 5%, 10, 15, 20, anything below that 25%, you won't qualify for a second draw, even though you might have qualified and received a first round of PPP loans. Additionally, you must have exhausted all of that PPP loan that you originally got in order to get a second draw. So if you received a PPP loan last year and exhausted it, and you meet the other qualifiers that I just mentioned, then you can go to your lender, fill out an application, and apply for a second draw. You might not get as much as you did the first time around. The caps are at $2 million this time, but it's a great opportunity for those businesses who've used up all of their original PPP loan and are looking for additional support. Now, the SBA just reopened the PPP program portal on Monday. Since it was and this is the first time since it was shut down in September, and will issue new loans to small businesses that meet the original qualifications and never received a loan. Mostly the rules for the first PPP loan are the same as they were last spring, but there's one significant change that's positive for businesses, and that is the taxability of your PPP loan. In this bill, Congress clarified that your PPP loan forgiveness is not taxable. And in addition to that, the expenses that you pay with your loan remain deductible as ordinary business expenses, just like you would deduct if you used other revenue to pay for it. So in this case, there are no tax consequences for receiving a PPP loan. Another change to the original loan is the list of eligible expenses you can use your PPP loan for. That has been expanded. Originally, it was just for payroll, mortgage, interest, rent, and utilities. Now it includes expenses that small businesses have made to comply with public health measures. For example, installing plexiglass or creating partitions or building drive-in windows. Those expenses are now forgivable expenses. The same is true if you have essential supplier goods, like perishable items that you order for your business and that are essential for operations. You can count that as eligible expenses as well and receive forgiveness. Now, one important note, though, is it still applies to the 60-40 rule still applies here, or is in effect, which means that 60% of your expenses for your total amount of loan forgiveness has to be for payroll expenses. So you can increase your loan forgivability because of those other eligible expenses, expansion of expenses, but still 60% of your loan must go towards paying your employees. Now, the new stimulus package also sets aside PPP money specifically for minority-owned businesses. probably the most important set aside, very similar to what happened last fall or last summer when the PP loan was replenished initially for community development, financial institutions, small credit unions, and small banks. So there's money in the PPP set aside specifically for loans made by those institutions. In addition, there are set asides for businesses with 10 or fewer employees who are receiving smaller loans under $250,000 located in low income areas. Lastly, the legislation changed rules to allow 501c6 nonprofit organizations, commonly the local chambers, and your direct marketing, travel, and tourism associations now qualify to apply for and receive PPP loans. There are some eligibility requirements for C6 organizations, specifically in terms of employee numbers and lobbying expenditures. However, I doubt that that would be a disqualifier for anyone on this call. But still, those disqualifiers are for the stipulations are that your chamber or nonprofit must have fewer than 300 employees, and your annual lobbying expenses cannot receive or spend more than 15% expenditures or exceed $1 million during the most recent tax year. Again, I doubt those would be disqualifiers, and I doubt, though, that anyone on this call would be disqualified under those stipulations. Now, in addition to those changes to the PPP loan program and the employee tax retention credit, there are two other programs that I want to mention, and then I'll open it up to questions as well. The first is the SBA's EIDL grant program, and the second is a live venue grants. As you may remember, the Small Business Administration's EIDL program, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program from last year, and that there was a grant of up to $10,000. This money ran out several times, and a lot of small businesses thought they were going to get the full $10,000 grant, but in most cases only ended up getting $1,000 or $2,000 as opposed to the $10,000 because it ended up being tied to the number of employees. So it was $1,000 per employee up to a maximum number or to a maximum number of 10 employees. If you had 20 employees, you still only got to account for 10 of them and get $10,000. So Congress has re-upped that, but in this case with a little bit of a twist. They have given priority to smaller businesses, those that have 300 or fewer employees, and that are located in a census tract that's eligible for a new market tax credit. Now, you can go online and type in new market tax credit maps, and you'll see a number of websites that have these maps tied to them and so forth. It's a little confusing. I've looked at those myself, and it's a little bit hard to understand. But SBA will be coming out with guidance to help you identify whether or not you fall in that area. So stay tuned to that. But in addition to that, you had to receive the grant. Besides being in that census tract area, you had to experience a 30% reduction in gross receipts for an 8-week period between March of last year and the end of the year, compared to a similar 8-week period either before the pandemic or in the prior year. So you have to kind of compare an 8-week period to the year before or just prior to kind of March the 2nd of last year. Now, if you meet all of these qualifications, then you're going to be at the front of the line for receiving the full $10,000 grant if you never received one. And even if you received a partial grant in 2020, you can reapply and possibly get the remaining portion of the $10,000. So this is a great opportunity, particularly for small businesses located in those low income neighborhoods, to access a grant that is specifically set aside for them as a grant, so you don't have to repay it. The other program included in this bill is a new grant for live venue operators. Those such as live event businesses, theaters, live performing arts organizations, museums, independent motion picture theaters, and more. It is specifically tailored and designed for those businesses that offer money or they're specifically tailored for those businesses and offer more money than the PPP loan program. It's a direct grant rather than a forgivable loan. So for both of those programs, the idle grant and the live venue grant, the SBA will be administrating those programs. Now, neither are currently up and running yet, but the SBA should be coming out with guidance in the next days or in the coming days or a few weeks. So you're going to want to start familiarizing yourself though with the SBA's website and those direct applications now though, just to get ready. Remember, if you're thinking about a PPP loan, either a second draw or a first loan, that's going to be through your banking institution, your lender. And the idle loan or the idle loan and grant or the live venues grant, those are going to be distributed through the SBA directly. And if you're focused on the employee retention tax credit, keep in mind you need to talk to your bookkeeper, your accountant, or your payroll company, whoever helps you with your payroll tax submissions. They should have all the information or be able to provide you guidance on your advice as to how you should apply or whether or not to, and so forth as well. Katie, with that, let me just stop there. Those are, like I said, those are kind of the four areas in which I think businesses are most interested in and have the best benefit for. That are the changes. Again, largely if you're applying for your first PPP loan, the qualifications that were set aside initially in the CARES Act are largely in place, with those few changes to accommodate a second draw PPP loan with some number, the number of employees, qualifications, and gross receipts decline changes and so forth as well. But otherwise, I'm happy to try to answer any questions you may have. So I'll kind of turn it back over to you.
Perfect. Thank you so much more. And I know it's a lot to keep up with, so I really appreciate you staying on top of that for all of us. We do have quite a few questions coming in, but while we're waiting for some more, if you do have a question, remember no question is too small, but we please ask that you don't put any personal or any identifying questions out there. So let's see, let's get started. Let's see, the first question we have more is, do service disabled veteran-owned small businesses count as a minority-owned business?
I would have to say, and again, I'm probably going to have to refer you to the SBA or your lender more specifically on some of these. I'm not quite sure, to be quite honest. I know a large focus of it is on minority-owned, women-owned businesses in these lower income neighborhoods and areas and so forth. And so they may very well, I'm not entirely sure on that, to be quite honest, but I think that's one of those things that'll have more guidance from the SBA real soon.
Okay, next question. If you did not get PPP last year and want to enroll in the first draw PPP, where can you find the participating lenders? SBA should have a list of those on their website. That information, and I just, by the way, just found out this morning, as I mentioned a moment ago, there's a set aside for those community development financial institutions, minority depository institutions, and so forth. There's a set aside for those lending institutions to help those businesses, small businesses in low income areas. As I mentioned a moment ago, the SBA's portal for these applications were just opened up on Monday. I just found out this morning that right now, exclusively the money that the applications and monies at this point are for those lending institutions. The rest of the lenders will have their money or have that ability to accept and distribute loans soon. I've heard as early as maybe next Monday, but have not heard confirmation on that just yet. But again, this is kind of, one thing that will be very important for everyone on this call and everyone that you're talking to off this call is to remain patient. Congress has set aside a great deal of money. They have said that there should be, based upon the lowering of the cap of $2 million and so forth, that just about every business that needs it, well,
I don't want to put words in their mouth, but they just simply said there's money set aside, and they should be able to help most businesses that generally need it, and so forth as well. So I'll stress patience as more information is going to be rolling out and guidance from the SBA. But the SBA's website should have a list of those, and if, as it relates to last year when they had it up on their sites. But they're probably updating it now to accommodate those smaller lending institutions, small banks, and others. So that might be the reason it may not be listed now if it isn't.
Perfect. And we'll put the SBA link in the chat box just so it's easily accessible to y'all as well. So, and also in your registration confirmation email, there was actually a resource page attached to that. If you click on that PDF, it has state and federal resources. And I think the SBA is listed as one of them. So be sure that you're checking your email on that and go into that resource page as well. It has contact information for each of those organizations.
Yeah.
Okay, Moore, thank you.
Katie, let me just remind people, partially one of the reasons there's money set aside for the lower income businesses and minority owned businesses and so forth, and those smaller banks and so forth as well, is a lot of businesses that applied and got their PPP loans initially. There was a little bit of a disproportionate level there, mostly because some of those other businesses had existing relationships with their lenders and banks. And so those banks and lending institutions, because of the flood of applications and need initially, they tended to work closer with those that they already had pre-existing relationships with. SBA and Congress and others recognize that for a lot of smaller businesses, those sole proprietors and others, they might not have had the same relationships. And so they were somewhat left out, and their banks were not given those resources as well to make those loans. And so that's the reason there's a carve out, money set aside for them. But all of that to simply say, as you're looking for lenders on that first draw, my suggestion is if you have a relationship with your bank, go ahead and begin talking to them. Even if they weren't maybe part of the program initially, I think there's going to be more banks. There will be more banks added to the list of lending institutions for people to go to.
And I think Adele wanted to add a little bit to that, our CEO, Miss Adele Lyons.
Yeah, yesterday I had a conversation with Vicki Rivers at Renaissance Community Loan Fund, which is a local CDC. Actually, it's a statewide CDC here in Mississippi. They have an office in Gulfport. So we'll put in the chat box their contact information. They are taking applications now because they're a CDC. So I would definitely agree with Moore to reach out to your bank where you currently have a commercial account and ask them if they're doing PPP loans. If not, or if you want to consider Renaissance, they're doing them now. They have applications now. There's probably other CDCs in our community that we can try to get that information as well to share. But we give you the contact information. Please don't go by their office. Please give them a call. We're trying to still continue to social distance. So I don't think stopping by is the real answer. I think it can all be handled via the phone or via email. So we'll put that in the chat box.
Thank you, Adele. And we also have an event coming up with them in February 10th, another Ask the Expert. And it's going to be about financial support for your small business. So be on the lookout for that as well. Moving right along, Moore, when can second round PPP applications apply?
They can start now. Again, if you're, once your lending institution, your banker, so forth, are able to start processing those applications, you can begin immediately. It's simply just a matter of have you met those qualifications that I mentioned in my presentation.
Perfect. What if I never received a PPP loan?
Then I would go ahead, as Adele said, and we've talked about, go ahead and talk to your lending institution, banker, whoever it is that you work with, and start the application now. Go ahead and get the application done now, and so that it's in the queue and ready to go once the portal is open for those other businesses or institutions to start accepting and processing applications.
Okay. This one is a more bit descriptive. I have a daycare with only 4 employees and did not qualify last year because my business was not opened until August of 2020. Will this disqualify me from the PPP or any other assistance this year?
I wouldn't think so. Whoever's asked that question, I'm curious as to what disqualified you at the time. And maybe that's a conversation, Katie, I'm happy to maybe get a little bit more information and then, try to find a little bit more I'm just kind of curious as to maybe what was the reason they didn't qualify at the time or whatever. But again, to the question itself, though, I'm not quite sure. There's why that wouldn't have happened. And again, there's money set aside specifically for smaller businesses with fewer than 10 employees now. And there may have been something in the old law that I missed and can't remember that may answer that question specifically, I guess, as to why they didn't before. But now there's money set aside for those businesses with fewer than 10.
They said because the daycare wasn't opened in February of 2020.
So it was so the date I don't want to take everybody's time. I'm curious as to maybe talk a little bit more with this person. Am I to assume, though, that the business just wasn't in operation until after the pandemic began?
It looks like it.
Okay. All right. Then that
they said correct.
Gotcha. Okay. Then I still think that perhaps you should be probably eligible for a PPP loan this time. Thank you. And I'm sorry for all the other callers to going back and forth between this one.
Hey, no, that's what makes this event so special is they're able to ask you those questions and get those responses quickly. And that person said, thank you. Okay. Next one. How can you compare numbers if you just started your business at the end of 2019?
You still have, I would say, even though you may have started your business at the end of 2019, you still have kind of until that March 2nd date in which you can compare your expenses and so forth.
Our business received the EIDL loan and the EIDL grant. However, we were required to pay back the EIDL grant of $10,000 because we received the EIDL loan. Would we be eligible to reapply for the grant of $10,000 in 2021?
I'll have to be honest. I don't think in the legislation, I am not aware of anything in the legislation that said that similar to a PPP second draw, that there is a second draw for the EIDL grant. That's not to say, and or even the EIDL loan. There's the EIDL loan, which requires you to pay back at a very low rate of like 1%, I believe, over like a 2-year period or whatever. The grant was you did not have to pay back. Now there was a deduction. There were opportunities where businesses could apply and receive both a PPP loan and an EIDL loan and grant. And at the time, you had to deduct the amount of your grant from the EIDL loan or the PPP loan value as forgivable. And those two loans, the EIDL loan, not the grant, but and the PPP loan, had to be used for separate expenses. Some of that has changed, but we're still waiting on some guidance from the SBA as to the EIDL loan and the grant, particularly if you're going to be able to apply for both again. So I'm sorry I don't have an answer to that more specific, but I think that's going to be one of those things that you'll want to start paying attention to a little bit as more guidance comes out from the SBA.
I hear there are some new programs specific to restaurants. Can you talk about that?
I really can't. I'm sorry. Going back to maybe the point of the original PPP loan program, there was, some monies for Well, that's not even to the point. I'm sorry. I really don't. Let me, Katie, would you please, as I mentioned before the call, if you'll kind of keep track of some of these questions that I'm unsure of or don't have an answer for, like that one, please follow up with me after the call, and let me see if I can't get an answer for you for that caller.
Absolutely, not a problem.
Thanks. I'm sorry about that.
No, you got a lot to keep up with.
The call is correct. I just don't recall what it is. I believe so.
Okay, next. Is the PPP portal open to all businesses now?
Yes. I haven't heard of any, disqualifiers other than the fact that, if, 500 or fewer employees, and if you're going for a second draw, it's 300 or fewer employees. For those 501c6 organizations, the disqualifiers are for, lobbying expenditures and 300 or fewer employees and so forth. But I'm unaware of any particular other businesses that are prohibited from applying.
And I think our CEO, Ms. Adele Lyons, had some information on the program specific to restaurants.
Oh, good. Adele, what is that?
Well, what I know, and again, I think we've got some information we can share from the National Restaurant Association, but that restaurants, to calculate their loan size, they use 3.5 times the average monthly payroll for a bar or a restaurant, where I think that number is lower for other businesses.
Adele, you're correct. When you're calculating your payroll expenses, which is what you would use largely to determine the amount of loan you're eligible for other businesses, it's 2.5% or 2.5 times an employee's salary up to $100,000. For a restaurant, it's 3.5 times that employee.
Yeah, and so certainly that's not a huge difference, but it's money in your pocket, as well as I think there might be some other a few other things. So I think we've got something from the National Restaurant Association that we can share that might be helpful to restaurants as well.
Thank you, Adele. And I put the Restaurant Association's website address into the chat box. I do want to remind everyone that we have about 6 more minutes left of this program, and we are going to try to get through your questions as best we can. I will be happy to download these questions afterwards and reach out to you with specific answers. And for those that have asked and more wanted to reach out, I'll be happy to send those to more as well. So don't panic if we don't get to your question. We will get to you, I promise. Don't panic. Okay, next question. If a nonprofit previously received an EIDL advancement of $10,000, will it be forgivable?
Katie, tell me, did they an EIDL loan or an EIDL grant?
From what I see, it's just an, let me see. I think he also put it in the chat. Let me see if he.
If it's a loan, there is it's like any loan. You have an interest rate that you have to pay and a time in which you have to pay it back. The rate is very low. It's like 1%, if I recall correctly. If it's a grant, though, the $10,000 grant, that's a grant that doesn't have to be repaid.
If you are the one that asked that question, if you just want to put it in the chat box, and then we can clarify and we'll come back to it. Okay, next. SBA disaster loans are now available here on the coast. Can people apply for the SBA stimulus loans as well as the SBA Hurricane Zeta disaster loans?
Great question. And my first response is yes, but I obviously you can tell I'm a little hesitant. I don't know. It may be something that's kind of wrapped up into one or the other. So I'm sorry, I can't really answer that. And I think that's probably best answered by maybe the SBA representative in your area or additional guidance that will be coming down soon. I'm sorry.
No, it's totally fine. And we also, we have the SBA event next week on the 21st at 9 a.m. for disaster relief. And then another one February 10th. That's going to be with Renaissance the SBA, and with SMPDD. That's on February 10th. So be on the lookout. If you're not following us on Facebook, make sure you're following our Facebook page. Make sure you're checking our calendar on our website as well. We'll post all that information there too. I read that you can only get PPP or one of the SBA live performing grants. If you got a first round PPP already, can you still apply for the grant, or does that disqualify you?
Katie, will you send that to me after this? I'm sorry, I don't want to answer that, and I don't know. I don't know. Let me
Not a
follow.
problem. I will definitely get that afterwards. Any programs designed for landlords?
It may depend. My first thought is it depends on how you, are you a, I mean, if you're a sole proprietor of a business, you can apply for PPP loans and the idle grants as well. I don't recall specific language regarding landlords. It may just be how you file your taxes and or incorporate, I guess. Maybe I'd feel better. Let's see if I can't find another answer or a more specific clarification. Okay.
Okay, and I think Vicki Rivers from Renaissance is actually on this call with us right now, and she said that SBA does not allow speculative ventures, nothing for landlords.
Okay.
So good to know. Let me see if I can go back up here. Click that. Okay. With respect to second draw for PPP loan, would you repeat the percentage of reduction in revenue that is required in order to qualify? And is that for any quarter of 2020? Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, yes, between that period of March 2nd to the end of the year, you just have to kind of compare it to a quarter pre-pandemic or in the previous year. Yes.
Okay, and then these are just some comments. Somebody from SBA said, I work for SBA and they have no release on how they are handling the new money, in quotes.
They have what? They have no guidance yet?
Yes, they have no release how they are handling the new money.
Yeah, that's
and thank you all so much for keeping those comments coming in. We really appreciate it. And Vicki with Renaissance also said the $10,000 idle deduction from forgiveness will be sent to the lender to pay off the remaining PPP balance. If the borrower has already paid the remainder left after the idle advance, the lender will remit those funds back to the borrower. I'm just trying to make sure I'm keeping up with the comments. Okay, looks like we got time for one more question. So this question says, I downloaded an application. Will I need my own application when I go to a lender?
That we've got copies of the applications on our website. So I think it's the same application, certainly if it's the original PPP loan.
Great. All right, and for those questions that we weren't able to get to today, do not panic. We were able to download these questions afterwards, and we'll be happy to reach back out to you with those answers. Thank you so much again, Moore, for taking the time to speak with us today. You're so knowledgeable, and we really just are so appreciative of the time that you come and talk to our community. But do you have any parting words?
No, Katie and Adele, thank you for, again, the opportunity to join you guys. I'm sorry I don't have all the answers. There's still some outstanding guidance as the SBA official mentioned a moment ago. So there's still more information. We can only try to tell you what the intent of the law or language of the law says. There's still, I guess, guidance, and I'm glad the representative from Reliance Bank was on to kind of answer some of those questions as well, and Adele obviously as well. There's all that is an example to say that there's a lot of information, still some unanswered questions, and more guidance coming. But again, I just appreciate the opportunity to join you. Thanks for what you and the chamber are doing down in along the coast of Mississippi. As many of you may or may not know, I'm from Mississippi originally, and so I always enjoy the opportunity to talk to fellow Mississippians and whether it's about this or anything else that the U.S. Chamber is doing and so forth. And thanks for what you're doing. I just simply say I encourage you to remain patient. With the lenders, with the SBA, and as we kind of go through this time and stuff. And so thanks a lot. And I'll look forward to your email with follow-up questions, and we'll try to get some responses to you the best that we can as soon as we can as well. So thanks, Katie.
Absolutely. And before you head out, make sure you're checking that chat box. We have the SBA applications listed on there. We have our Facebook page, another great resource. We have all of our upcoming events, which include Gulfport Reports update from the Chiefs and that Ask the Expert SBA disaster loan assistance that we were talking about, which is happening next week as well. That Ask the Expert is a completely free virtual event, as all of our Ask the Experts are. And we were able to do that thanks to our generous series sponsors, Hancock Whitney and Memorial Hospital of Gulfport. I want to thank you so much again, Moore, for being such an advocate for not only the chambers, but for all businesses. So we really appreciate you taking the time to do this. Like I said, if we did not get to your question today, don't panic. We will get that to you. We'll also be sending a survey out after this event. So maybe we can add the questions and the answers in there and with that survey too. So once again, thank you so much for joining us. And if you're interested in joining the Mississippi Gulf Coast Chamber of Commerce, I highly encourage you to call us at 228-604-0014 or visit our website at mscoastchamber.com. And on that note, as we like to say at the Mississippi Gulf Coast Chamber, have a chamber day. Thank you so much, Moore. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.